Blood washes out of silk if you use cold water and salt. That was the first strange lesson Naya learned on her wedding night. People think a mafia marriage is all black cars, whispered threats, and cash stuffed into leather bags. It is not. Sometimes it is sitting in a room heavy with perfume, pretending not to notice the bruised knuckles of the man cutting steak beside you. Rain beat against the windows of the Russell estate, throwing long, broken shadows across the Persian rugs. Naya moved quietly through the hallway. She had traded her heels for felt slippers so she would not disturb anyone. In her hands, she carried a silver tray with a crystal glass and a decanter of expensive scotch. She was still trying. That was the saddest part. She was still trying so hard. It was well past midnight. Dante had locked himself in his study after dinner, and Naya, still clinging to the role of his dutiful bride of 3 months, had convinced herself a small peace offering might soften the distance between them. The house smelled of polished wood, wet stone, and the faint metallic scent that seemed to follow Dante's world everywhere. She stopped a few feet from the heavy mahogany doors. They were open just enough to let a thin slice of yellow light cut across the dark hallway. Naya shifted the tray against her hip and lifted her hand to knock. Then she heard her name. "Naya's trying too hard," a man said with a short, cruel laugh. It was not Dante. It was Thomas, his underboss, a man who always smelled faintly of peppermint and gunpowder. "The staff is talking," Thomas went on. "She asked the chef for your mother's risotto recipe. She is nesting." Naya froze outside the door. For one embarrassing second, hope moved through her chest. She had spent 3 hours in the kitchen that afternoon, burning her thumb on a hot pan while trying to get the broth right. She had wanted Dante to notice, not make a scene, not fall at her feet, just notice. She held her breath and waited for him to answer. Behind the door, ice clinked against glass. When Dante finally spoke, his voice was low and flat, nothing like the warm, charming voice he used at dinner parties. "Let her play house," he said. A match struck. The sharp scent of sulfur drifted through the crack, followed by the thick smoke of a Cuban cigar. "You do not think it is a problem?" Thomas asked. "She looks at you like she expects a real marriage." Dante gave a humorless laugh. "Then she is not very bright." Naya's fingers tightened around the tray. "I am keeping her calm," Dante said. His chair scraped against the hardwood. "That is all. She is a transaction. Tommy, her father, gave me port access. I gave him his life. The girl was part of the deal." The words landed so cleanly that Naya almost did not feel them at first. Transaction. Part of the deal. The glass on the tray trembled, but she did not drop it. Thomas was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its bite. "Still, she is not a bad girl." Dante exhaled smoke. "I do not care if she is a saint." The answer came too quickly, too coldly. "I need an heir. That is why she is in my bed. The commission wants stability, and a son gives them that. Once she gives me a boy, she can decorate the East Wing and rot there for all I care. I will tolerate her until the bloodline is secure. After that, she is no longer my concern." Naya's breath locked in her lungs. The silver edge of the tray pressed painfully into her hip, but she could not move. She stood there, listening to the last piece of her hope break quietly in half. Tolerate, that was the word that stayed. Not love, not duty, not even kindness. Naya looked down at the decanter, at the amber scotch shifting softly in the crystal. She had spent 90 days studying him like a foreign language. She knew how he took his coffee, which shirts he preferred for meetings, which old songs made his jaw relax by the fireplace. She had told herself his silence was restraint. His rough hands were clumsy tenderness. His distance was fear. But he had not been afraid of loving her. He had never been close to it. He was waiting for her body to give him a son. That was all. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. Something inside her went still instead. Inside the study, Dante had already moved on. "What about the docks?" he asked. "Did the shipment clear customs?" Naya took one step back, then another. The felt slippers swallowed every sound. She carried the tray back to the kitchen, as carefully as if she were holding evidence from a crime scene, there, under the cold white lights. She poured the scotch straight down the stainless steel sink. The expensive liquor spiraled into the black drain. She set the empty glass on the marble counter. It made a small, sharp sound. Then she stood there for a moment with both palms pressed flat to the stone, waiting for her body to catch up with what her heart had already understood. When Naya climbed the sweeping staircase to the master bedroom, the air felt thin and strange. She pulled off the expensive blue silk robe she had bought, only because Dante had once mentioned liking that color. Then she shoved it deep into the closet, behind winter coats and unused luggage. She put on an oversized gray t-shirt from high school, climbed into the huge empty bed, and stared at the ceiling until the rain stopped. Morning at the Russell estate usually followed the same suffocating routine. Naya would wake early, brush her hair until her scalp stung, hide her tired face with makeup, and go downstairs to play the perfect wife. She would pour his coffee, ask about his day, smile at every cold crumb he gave her. That morning, she woke up and looked at the silver-backed hairbrush on her vanity. Then she left it there. She did not touch the foundation or mascara. She twisted her hair into a careless knot, pulled on a black turtleneck and matching slacks, and went downstairs. The dining room felt too large, too polished, too quiet. The mahogany table stretched out like a stage, set for two at the far end. Coffee steamed in a silver pot. Bacon hissed under a covered tray. Marian, the housekeeper, gave her a gentle smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Russell. Shall I bring your plate? I will serve myself." "Marian, thank you." Naya's voice was polite, but the bright little warmth she usually forced into it was gone. She took one slice of dry toast, poured herself black tea, and sat down. Not in the chair directly to Dante's right, where she always sat so she could feel close to him. She chose a seat 3 chairs away. 10 minutes later, Dante's footsteps echoed from the hall. He entered the dining room like bad weather in a tailored suit. Broad shoulders, charcoal jacket, dark hair slicked back, a jaw sharp enough to look carved. He smelled of bergamot, leather, and smoke. He took his place at the head of the table without really looking at her. "Morning, morning," Naya said. No softness, no careful smile, just the word, plain and empty. Dante reached for the coffee pot, then paused. Usually, Naya poured his coffee before his hand even moved. Today she took a bite of toast and let him get it himself. His eyes flicked toward her. "You are sitting far away." It was not a question. He said it the way he would note a knife left on the wrong side of a plate. "The light is better here," Naya said. She looked down at the newspaper spread before her. Though the tiny printed words blurred together, Dante poured his own coffee. The sound of it hitting porcelain seemed too loud in the room. He studied her over the rim of his cup. She could feel it, that heavy, measuring stare. "You look different," he said. "I did not sleep well. You were asleep when I came to bed." "I was pretending," she thought. "Just like you." But she only said, "I was tired." She turned the newspaper page with more force than necessary. Dante took a slow sip of coffee. He noticed things. He had built his life on noticing things. A nervous blink before a lie. A twitch in a rival's hand. A room going quiet for the wrong reason. Now he was noticing her. Naya rubbed the edge of her napkin between her fingers and kept her face still. She would not ask him whether he had meant it. She already knew. That was the wound. "Marian said you asked for the risotto recipe yesterday," Dante said as he cut into a strip of bacon. Naya's stomach tightened, but her face stayed calm. "Let her play house." The words passed through her mind with the bitter taste of smoke. "I did," she said. "But I changed my mind. I told the chef to handle dinners from now on." Dante lowered his fork. "Why, I have other things to do, such as—" Naya looked toward the tall windows. Outside, the garden lay brown, tangled and dead beneath the pale morning light. "I am going to redesign the garden." The answer had come out of nowhere, but the moment she said it, it felt right. Dirt would be better than begging. Dead roots would be easier to understand than him. The garden is fine, Dante said. Naya looked at him then. Really looked at him. The garden is dead. The words sat between them. Dante's eyes narrowed. Not with anger at first, but confusion. She was supposed to smile after saying something sharp. Soften it. Apologize with her eyes. She did none of that. She saw him clearly in that moment. The beautiful suit. The controlled face. The man who had reduced her to a signature and a deal, and still expected breakfast to feel normal. Dante leaned back in his chair. For the first time since she had married him. He seemed unsure what to do with her silence. The grandfather clock ticked in the hall. Neither of them moved. At last, Dante picked up his fork. Do what you want with the yard, he said. Just do not make a mess of the patio. The Rossi brothers are coming Thursday. Naya stood. Her toast was still half untouched on the plate. I will be sure to stay out of your way. She left the dining room without asking permission and without giving him the kiss on the cheek he expected every morning. Her back stayed straight as she crossed the doorway. She felt his eyes on her spine, hot and puzzled. But she did not look back. In the hall, her hands began to shake. She curled them into fists and kept walking. He had wanted a transaction. Fine, from that morning on. He would get one. Naya changed the rules quietly. She stopped making his coffee. She stopped asking whether he had eaten. When they passed each other in the hallway, she gave him the same polite nod she gave the gardener. The bedroom became the worst part. When Dante reached for her in the dark, she did not fight him. She knew the contract. But she went still. No whispered name. No fingers in his hair. No soft breath against his neck. She stared at the ceiling and waited for it to be over. Dante noticed. Of course he noticed. His hands tightened on her waist. His breathing changed. He waited for the woman who used to meet him halfway. She never came back. He never asked what was wrong. That was the most telling part. Instead, he turned away afterward and left a space between them that felt colder than the marble floors downstairs. Naya slept in it without moving. By Friday night, their private war followed them into public. The syndicate gala was held in a hotel ballroom downtown. All gold light, polished glass, and old criminals pretending to be gentlemen. Naya stood before her vanity mirror and prepared herself like someone preparing for a trial. She chose a dress that felt like armor. Deep emerald silk, high neck, long sleeves, open back, expensive, elegant, untouchable. She clipped diamond drops to her ears and watched them swing against her neck. Dante appeared in the mirror behind her, adjusting the cuffs of his tuxedo. He looked like a weapon cleaned and polished for display. The light cut across his face, sharpening the shadows beneath his cheekbones. You look, he began. Then he stopped. His eyes moved over her reflection, and his mouth tightened. Usually she wore red because he liked red. Usually she chose dresses that made her look soft, warm, easy to touch. Tonight nothing about her invited him closer. Naya smoothed the silk over her hips. Is it inappropriate? She asked. No, Dante said after a beat. It is fine. Another pause. The car is waiting. The ride to the hotel was quiet enough to make the leather seats creak seem loud. Rain slicked the streets, and neon light smeared across the windows. Dante sat stiffly beside her, one hand resting on his knee. Halfway there, he reached across the console toward her leg. Naya saw the movement from the corner of her eye. She shifted away before his fingers touched her and turned her face toward the window. His hand stopped in midair, then dropped awkwardly onto the leather between them. Neither of them spoke. He pulled his hand back slowly, as if he had touched something sharp. Naya watched the city slide past the glass and felt nothing but a tired, steady cold. The ballroom swallowed them in noise. Perfume, roasted meat, cigar smoke, champagne, false laughter. A string quartet played somewhere behind the crowd, almost drowned out by men discussing crimes in voices soft enough to sound civilized. Dante placed his hand at the small of Naya's back as they moved through the room. Once that gesture would have made her feel chosen. Tonight it felt like a label. Mine, she smiled when she had to. accepted compliments, shook hands, but she did not lean into him. She kept her spine straight and left the smallest space between his palm and her skin. Dante's fingers flexed once, as if he wanted to pull her closer by force. He did not. 2 hours later, Dante was trapped in a conversation with 3 old bosses and a senator who looked more frightened than corrupt. Naya used a headache as an excuse and slipped away to the bar. She ordered club soda and leaned against the marble counter, grateful for the cool surface at her back. The noise was making her temples throb. Then a voice slid in beside her. "A little lonely over here, aren't you, Mrs. Russell?" Naya turned. A man in a loud suit leaned on the bar. Blonde hair slicked back with too much product. She knew the face after a second. Billy Donahue, a mid-level thug from a rival crew. The kind of man who mistook proximity for permission. "I was enjoying the quiet," Naya said, turning away. Donahue laughed and stepped closer. Too close. The edge of the bar pressed into her spine. Dante leaves his pretty new wife alone. Careless of him. His eyes moved over her exposed back. "If I had a wife who looked like you, I would keep her on a shorter leash." Naya's stomach turned. "My husband does not need a leash, and you need to step back." Donahue smiled. "Slow and ugly. Word is he only married you to settle a tab. That must sting." He leaned in until she could smell gin on his breath. "Knowing you were just a glorified receipt." For 1 second, Naya could not speak. Not because he had shocked her, but because he had found the exact words Dante had already carved into her. Then a large hand clamped down on Donahue's shoulder. The grip was so hard Donahue's knees bent. Dante pulled him back and stepped between them. He did not shout. He did not need to. The air around him changed, and several conversations nearby died at once. "Donahue," he said quietly, "if you ever look at my wife again, I will take your eyes out and leave them in your mother's mailbox." Donahue went pale. "Dan, I meant no disrespect." Dante leaned closer. "Get out." Donahue stumbled away, nearly knocking into a waiter as he disappeared through the crowd. Dante turned to Naya. His chest rose and fell sharply, his eyes dark with anger. He grabbed her arm and pulled her against his side. "Are you all right? Did he touch you?" Naya looked down at his hand around her bicep. His grip was too tight. His knuckles were white. A month earlier, she might have mistaken this for love. She might have let herself believe he was a husband defending his wife. Tonight she saw it for what it was. Donahue had not touched the woman Dante loved. He had insulted something that belonged to him. There was a difference, and now she knew it. Naya lifted her free hand and peeled Dante's fingers off her arm one by one, slowly, calmly. His anger faltered with each finger she removed. "I am fine. Dante," she said. "There is no need to make a scene over a receipt." The word hit him harder than she expected. Dante went still, the fury drained from his face, leaving something raw and startled behind. His hand fell to his side, for the first time all night. He looked less like a boss and more like a man who had heard an echo of his own cruelty in someone else's mouth. Naya did not wait for him to recover. "I would like to go home now," she said. Then she turned away. She did not check whether he followed. Of course he followed. The ride home was worse than the ride there. Dante stayed against his side of the seat, jaw clenched, one hand pressed into a fist on his thigh. Naya watched rain crawl down the tinted window in crooked lines. The heater blew warm air over her legs, but she still felt cold. It was not fear. It was the crash that came after saying aloud the thing she had been swallowing for weeks. When the car stopped, Dante got out first and walked through the freezing drizzle without offering his hand. He waited by the front doors as she climbed the stone steps. Inside, the estate was silent except for rain tapping against the glass. "What did you mean by that?" Dante asked as soon as the doors closed. His voice was low, but it carried through the marble foyer like a shot. Naya did not answer. She opened her clutch, took out a makeup wipe, and tore the foil wrapper. The sound was small and harsh in the quiet. Dante stepped closer. "Naya," she wiped the red lipstick from her mouth, watching the color smear across the cloth. "Do not pretend you do not know." His expression hardened. Donahue was drunk. Street trash says things. He repeated what you already said. Dante's face changed. A flicker. A tightening around the eyes. There it was. Naya dropped the used wipe onto a silver tray by the door. It landed with a wet, ugly sound. He called me a receipt, she said. You called me paperwork. Dante went very still. The rain behind them seemed louder. What are you talking about? He asked, but his voice had lost its edge. Naya finally looked at him. In the foyer light. He was still handsome. Still dangerous. Still dressed like a man who owned the city. But the spell was gone. She could see the fear under the control now. She could see him calculating which lie might work. I am tired, she said. Then she turned and walked up the stairs. Dante followed, his steps heavy behind her. Naya, stop. She did not. At the landing. She turned left instead of right. Dante stopped. The master suite was down the right hallway. The guest rooms were on the left. He watched her open the door to the third guest bedroom. A room used for visiting associates and distant cousins no one liked. What are you doing? He demanded. Going to sleep. Your bedroom is down the hall. Naya turned then, one hand resting on the doorknob. Her face was calm, but her throat ached from holding herself together. Your bedroom is down the hall, she said. Dante stared at her as if she had slapped him. Do not do this. It was the first thing he said that sounded almost human. Naya looked past him, toward the closed door of the master suite, toward the bed where she had learned what it felt like to disappear while someone touched her. I will have my clothes moved tomorrow while you are at the docks, she said. Good night, Dante. Then she stepped inside and shut the heavy oak door. The latch clicked into place. Such a small sound. In that enormous house. It felt final. Dante remained on the other side. Naya could see his shadow blocking the light beneath the door. He did not knock. He did not order her out. For several minutes. Neither of them moved. Naya stood with her back against the door, listening to his breathing on the other side. She knew him well enough to imagine his hand lifting, stopping just short of the wood. He wanted to push the door open. He wanted to be the boss who solved every problem by force. But this was not a rival crew, and she was not one of his men. Finally, his footsteps moved away. The floorboards groaned under his weight. Only then did Naya slide down the door until she hit the cold hardwood. She pulled her knees to her chest, bit her knuckles, and let the first ugly sob tear out of her. She had drawn the line. Now she had to live behind it. 3 weeks passed, and the house turned into a beautiful place no one wanted to breathe in. Dante was rarely home. When he was, he sat in his study with whiskey and unfinished business papers, glaring at nothing. Naya avoided him with the skill of someone learning a dangerous map. She stopped being a decorative wife and went to the garden instead. She refused to hire help. She bought cheap canvas gloves, found rusted shears in the shed, and sank her hands into the dirt. Dead rose bushes came out root by root. Thorns tore through the gloves and scratched her arms. The sting helped. At least pain from thorns made sense. The smell of wet soil and rotting leaves became easier to bear than the smell of Dante's cigars. Then one Tuesday at 2 a.m, Naya stood in the kitchen, wearing her faded gray shirt and pouring a glass of tap water while lightning flashed beyond the windows. The back door flew open. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered in the sink. Dante stumbled inside. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was torn at the collar. His left sleeve was soaked in dark blood. For half a second, he looked less like the feared Dante Russell and more like a man who had only barely made it home alive. He braced one hand against the doorframe, breathing hard. Blood rained. Sweat and whiskey came into the room with him. His eyes flicked to the broken glass in the sink. Do not move, he rasped. Then he took one step and almost went down. 2 months earlier, Naya would have run to him crying. She would have pressed frantic hands to his chest and begged him to tell her where it hurt. Tonight she stepped away from the sink, shook water from her fingers, and went to the pantry for the medical kit. Sit down before you bleed on the tile, she said. Her voice was steady. Dante stared at her, dazed, then lowered himself onto a bar stool. Naya set the white plastic box on the counter. Take off your shirt. Dante fumbled with the buttons. His bloody fingers slipped twice, and he cursed under his breath. Naya watched for a moment, then stepped forward, pushed his hands away, and ripped the remaining buttons open. Her knuckles brushed his hot, damp chest. He flinched as if that brief touch had hurt more than the wound. Naya kept her eyes on the injury. She peeled the ruined fabric away and found a jagged knife cut across his upper arm. Deep but not fatal. Still bleeding, but slower now. She pressed gauze to it. Dante hissed through his teeth and watched her face for a reaction she refused to give him. It missed the artery, she said. You are lucky. She opened the iodine. This will burn. She poured it into the wound before he could answer. Dante's jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped near his ear. But he made no sound. Naya wiped away the blood with clean gauze. Her hands did not shake. There was no trembling relief. No tender fussing. No soft question about who had done this to him. Dante seemed to notice every missing piece. Ambush in the south end, he said after a moment. His voice was rough. Thomas took a bullet in the leg. He waited. Naya wrapped the bandage tighter. Hold still. Dante blinked at her. He had handed her information he never shared. Offered danger like bait. And she had not taken it. Did you hear me? He asked. I heard you. Thomas was shot. Then Thomas needs a doctor. She taped the bandage down. Dante looked at her as if he no longer knew what language she was speaking. Her hair was messy, her nails dark with garden soil, her shirt wrinkled from sleep. She smelled of rainwater and plain soap. Not the Paris perfume he had bought her. She was still his wife. But she no longer looked like the woman who used to wait up for him. You did not even ask if I was all right, he said. The accusation came out softer than he meant it to. Naya picked up his ruined shirt with 2 fingers and dropped it into the trash. You walked in. You are talking. You are fine. Dante's eyes darkened. I could have died tonight. Naya shut the medical box and finally looked at him. The room was quiet except for the rain and his unsteady breathing. If you had died, she said, your lawyers would have called me in the morning to sign whatever papers they needed. Dante flinched. Not much, just a small movement in his face. A crack in the mask. Naya saw it and hated that it still hurt her to see him hurt. She picked up the medical kit. Do not get the bandage wet for 24 hours. Good night. She left him there with the broken glass still glittering in the sink. By late July, the heat pressed down on the estate until even the walls seemed tired. On a Thursday afternoon, Naya knelt in the garden, digging around the roots of a dead hydrangea with a small iron trowel. Sweat ran down her neck and soaked the back of her shirt. Her arms ached. Mud streaked her forearms, mixing with old scratches and fresh ones. She was not gentle with the plant. She drove the trowel into the dry earth again and again, prying at the stubborn root ball like it had personally wronged her. In a way it had. Everything dead in that garden felt familiar. Gravel crunched behind her. Expensive shoes. Dante. Naya ignored him and pulled harder at the roots. Stop, he said. She kept digging. Naya, the trowel struck a stone with a dull clank. She shifted her weight and drove it in again. A shadow fell over her, blocking the sun. Dante's hand closed around her wrist, stopping the next strike. His grip was firm but not crushing. He had learned that much. At least, Naya let the trowel fall. Slowly she rose to her feet and brushed dirt from her knees. Her body hurt everywhere. She looked at his hand around her wrist, then lifted her eyes to his face. Dante looked exhausted. His eyes were bloodshot, and the skin beneath them was bruised with sleeplessness. He wore suit pants and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. The bandage she had wrapped around his arm showed beneath the fabric. His hair, usually perfect, had come loose near his forehead. I said, stop, he repeated. You look like a vagrant. Naya looked down at herself. Mud, sweat, torn gloves, dirt under her nails. I am redesigning the garden, she said. I told you weeks ago. Dante released her wrist and dragged a hand through his hair. You are not redesigning it. You are tearing it apart. It was dead. You say that about everything now. His voice sharpened, then cracked at the edge. The garden. The house. Minaya crossed her arms. Have I failed in my duties? Dante recoiled as if the word had a taste he hated. Do not talk like that. Why not? That is what this is. Is it not? Duties, terms. Bloodlines. He looked away first. That small victory gave her no pleasure. You have spent a month ignoring me, he said. You leave rooms when I enter them. You look at me like I am no one. No, Naya said. I look at you like I finally know who you are. Dante stepped closer, crowding her against the dead hydrangea. Where is my wife? He asked. The words came out rough, almost desperate. The woman who made my coffee, who tried to cook my mother's risotto, who looked at me like I was worth something. Naya stared at him. For a moment, all she could feel was a cold, sharp disbelief. He did not miss her. Not really. He missed the version of himself he saw reflected in her face. The adored man. The forgivable man. The man she had invented because she needed him to be real. That woman was trying to love you, Naya said. You found that inconvenient. Dante grabbed her shoulders, then seemed to realize how hard he was holding her and loosened his grip. Tell me what you want, he said. Milan. A car, a house away from all this for the summer. Just tell me how to fix it. Naya looked at his hands on her shoulders. She remembered the hallway outside his study, the smell of cigar smoke, the way his voice had stayed calm while he cut her life into pieces. You cannot fix this with a car. Then with what? He demanded. What do you want from me? Naya met his eyes. I wanted a husband. You wanted a pawn. The color left Dante's face. Naya stepped closer, forcing him to drop his hands. A transaction, she said. Paperwork. Port access. An incubator until your bloodline was secure. Dante's mouth opened, but no answer came. His eyes shifted. And that was all the confirmation she needed. Do not lie, she said quietly. Not now, he whispered her name. It sounded weak. Wrong. Naya had imagined this confrontation 100 times, and in every version she had cried. Now she felt strangely calm. You said I could rot in the East Wing after I gave you a son. You said I would be invisible to you. Congratulations. Dante, you got what you wanted early. Dante looked around the ruined garden as if the dirt itself had betrayed him. You heard that? Yes, Naya, do not make it smaller than it was. Her voice stayed even. And that seemed to scare him more than shouting would have. You were not angry. You were not drunk. You were not trying to hurt me in the moment. You were calm. You meant every word. Dante swallowed. The commission watches everything. Thomas watches everything. If they thought I cared too much, stop. Naya lifted one hand. You are not explaining love. You are explaining strategy. I am tired of being buried under your strategy. He reached for her, then stopped himself. I was protecting you. Naya gave a short, dry laugh. It hurt her throat. No, you were protecting the ports. Your image. Your control. Maybe you even convinced yourself it was for me. But that does not make it true. Dante stood in the dirt, silent and visibly shaken. For once, there was no order to give. No man to threaten. No check to write. Naya took off her dirty gloves and slapped them against her thigh. Dust rose between them. I cared about you, she said. That is the part you never understood. I was not pretending. You killed something real before it had a chance to survive. She turned and walked toward the house. Dante did not follow. He stayed in the heat, surrounded by dead roots and torn earth. After that, he did not come home for 3 days. Without him, the estate felt less like a home and more like a museum after closing. Quiet, expensive. Naya kept working in the garden. She turned the soil until her back burned and her palms blistered. She planted nothing. Not yet. Empty earth was honest. It did not ask her to smile. It did not pretend to be alive. On the third afternoon, she sat outside with lemon water and a paperback, letting the blank dirt rest in front of her. The glass door opened behind her. Dante stepped onto the patio. He looked immaculate, which somehow made him look worse. His suit was crisp, his shoes polished, his hair controlled, but his eyes were hollow with exhaustion. Naya kept one finger between the pages of her book and looked up. He walked to the metal table and placed a deep blue velvet box in front of her. It landed with a soft, expensive thud. "I bought it in the Diamond District," he said. His voice sounded rough, like he had spent 3 days arguing with himself and lost. Naya looked at the box, then at him. "What is it?" "A bracelet. 5 carats. Flawless stones." For a few seconds, Naya only stared. The disconnect was almost pitiful. Dante Russell could move weapons through a harbor, scare judges, buy silence, and make grown men shake. But standing in front of his wife, he had brought diamonds to a funeral. "Should I wear it while I rot in the East Wing?" she asked softly. "Or only when I am busy being useful to your bloodline?" Dante's face tightened. "Please stop repeating that." "Why? You said it beautifully the first time." His phone vibrated before he could answer. He glanced at the screen, and whatever he saw stripped the color from his face. Naya saw the name before he turned the phone over. Thomas Dante's jaw hardened. "Go inside," he said. The old command slipped out before he could catch it. Naya did not move. No, the phone buzzed again. Then Silas appeared at the patio door, pale and breathless. "Boss, there is a problem at the north gate." Dante's eyes cut to him. "What kind of problem?" Silas hesitated, glancing at Naya as if she were furniture that had suddenly learned to listen. Dante noticed, for the first time. He did not let it pass. "Speak in front of my wife," he said. Silas swallowed. "Thomas sent men. They have her father as driver. They say Mrs. Russell comes out, or they send him back in pieces." The patio went silent except for the soft tick of the cooling metal table. Naya's book slipped from her fingers and landed face down on the stone. Her father had sold her. Yes, he had traded her without flinching. But the driver. Elias was an old man who had taught her to change a tire when she was 16. He had nothing to do with any of this. Dante stood very still. This was the moment when the old Dante would have barked orders, locked her in a room, and called it protection. Instead, he turned to her. Not Silas. Not the guards. Her. "Do you know Elias well?" he asked. Naya's throat tightened. "Yes," Dante nodded once. "Then we get him back alive." Naya stared at him, unsure whether she had heard him correctly. Dante removed the velvet box from the table and set it aside as if it embarrassed him now. "Silas," he said, "bring the men to the front hall. No one moves until Mrs. Russell hears the terms." Silas blinked. Boss Dante's voice dropped. "You heard me." Then he looked back at Naya. "Thomas is using you because he thinks I still treat you like an object. I gave him that idea. I will correct it." The words were not soft. They were not romantic. But they were concrete. For once, he was not trying to buy her forgiveness. He was changing the rules where his men could see it. 10 minutes later, the front hall was packed with armed men. Marble floors. Dark suits. Rain light pressing against the tall windows. Naya stood beside Dante, not behind him. Every eye in the room found her and then quickly looked away. Dante noticed that too. "Look at her," he ordered. Slowly, the men obeyed. "This is my wife," Dante said. "Not a debt. Not a weakness. Not a woman you discuss in corners. If a decision involves her family, her safety, or this house, she hears it. If any man here has a problem taking orders in front of her, he can leave now and pray I never find him." No one moved. Naya felt her pulse in her throat, but she did not step back. Silas laid a phone on the console table. A video call came through. Thomas appeared on the screen, pale from blood loss, smug from stupidity. Behind him, Elias sat tied to a chair with a bruise on his cheek. Naya's hands went cold. Dante's face did not change, but the air around him sharpened. Thomas, he said. You are making this worse. Thomas laughed. You made it worse when you let a wife turn you soft. His eyes moved toward Naya through the screen. Hello, Mrs. Russell. Still playing house. The insult landed differently now. Naya stepped closer to the phone before Dante could answer. No, she said. I am learning where the rod is. Thomas' smile faltered. Dante looked at her, then gave a small nod. Permission, maybe, or respect. Naya did not need either, but she understood the difference. You want leverage, she said to Thomas. You chose an old driver because you thought I would panic, and Dante would trade something stupid to make me quiet. That was your mistake. Thomas leaned toward the camera. Careful, sweetheart. Dante's hand tightened at his side. But he stayed silent. Naya heard the silence. It was not abandonment this time. It was room. Elias is worth more alive, she said, dead. He buys you one angry widow and a war. Alive, he buys you safe passage long enough to crawl out of the city. Thomas stared at her, surprised enough to listen. Naya kept going. Her voice steady, though her stomach twisted. You want the South warehouses. You will not get them. But Dante will release the 2 accounts he froze this morning, and let you leave with the men still loyal to you. Silas looked startled. Dante's face stayed unreadable. Thomas' eyes narrowed. And why would Russell agree to that? Naya looked at Dante. This was the test. Not a kiss. Not a gift. A choice in front of everyone. Dante held her gaze, then turned to the phone. Because my wife made a cleaner offer than I would have. The hall went very quiet. Take it, Dante said, or I come for you myself. Thomas tried to laugh, but the sound came out thin. He wanted to mock her again. Naya could see it in his mouth. But now every man in the hall had heard Dante back her publicly. The shape of the room had changed. Thomas looked away first. Fine, he snapped. The driver walks when the transfer clears. Dante lifted one finger. Silas moved fast, sending orders through a second phone. Naya did not breathe until 20 minutes later. The gatehouse radio crackled. Elias had been released near the old bridge. Alive, bruised, shaken, but walking. Only then did Dante end the call. The men waited for him to explode. He did not. He turned to Naya. You saved a life today. Naya did not know what to do with that. Praise from Dante used to be something she would have carried around for days like a lit candle. Now it only made her tired. Elias saved mine once, she said. He drove me away from my father when I needed air. Dante looked down, absorbing one more thing he had never bothered to learn. I am sorry, he said quietly. Not for everything. Not in some grand, polished way. Just for that. For not knowing. For making her life small enough that an old driver had mattered more than her husband. Naya looked at him and saw no performance there. It did not heal her. But it reached her. By nightfall, Elias was safe in the staff quarters with Marion fussing over him. Dante sent extra guards to the gates, then did something that made the whole house whisper. He called every senior man back into the front hall and had Naya stand beside him again. From today, he said, Mrs. Russell has authority inside this estate. Staff, security, visitors, family matters. If she gives an instruction, you treat it as mine unless I stand beside her and say otherwise. Silas nodded first. The others followed. Naya watched their faces change. Some with fear, some with resentment, some with reluctant respect. Dante did not look at them. He looked at her. That should have been true from the beginning. Later, a storm rolled in hard enough to knock out the power. The estate went black except for lightning flashing behind the windows. Naya lay awake in the guest room, unable to stop seeing Elias' bruised face on the phone screen. Then came a crash from downstairs. Not thunder. Crystal, a heavy thud followed. She sat up, pulse jumping. For a moment, she thought of Thomas, of men at gates, of violence slipping through doors no matter how many guards stood outside. She crossed the hallway barefoot and reached the study. The doors were wide open. Broken glass glittered across the floor. Dante was on the ground beside his desk. One hand clawed into his shirt, fighting for air. There was no blood this time. No attacker. Only Dante, gray-faced and shaking, trapped inside his own body. Naya stepped carefully through the glass and dropped beside him. Dante, he did not hear her. His breath came short and useless. She pressed her palm to his chest. His heart hammered so fast it frightened her. This man had stood in front of armed men that afternoon and given her power in a room built to deny it. Now he was gasping on the floor, undone by the cost of finally changing. "Look at me," she said. Her voice was firm. His wild eyes snapped to hers. He grabbed her wrist. "Cannot breathe." "Yes, you can. Follow me." He shook his head, panic pulling him under. Naya moved her other hand to the back of his neck. "Through your nose." "In," he tried. Failed, tried again. "Good, hold it." She counted. Thunder rolled over the house. Lightning washed the room white. Then black again. Out slowly. His grip hurt, but she did not pull away. The first few breaths were broken. Then they found a rhythm. In, hold out. Again. She did not stroke his hair or promise him he was forgiven. She did not have that softness ready. But she stayed. After long minutes, his shoulders sank. His heart slowed under her palm. The great Dante Russell leaned against his desk, emptied by fear. "I thought I was dying," he whispered. "You were panicking," Naya said. He closed his eyes. "Why did you help me?" The question felt different now than it would have weeks ago, less arrogant, more afraid of the answer. Naya looked at the broken decanter, then at his pale face. "Because you helped Elias today," she said, "and because basic decency should not be rarer than loyalty in this house." Dante opened his eyes. Shame moved across his face, quiet and unmistakable. "I should have done that for you long before today." Naya did not answer. She stood carefully, avoiding the glass. "Try to sleep somewhere that is not covered in scotch." By morning the study smelled of bleach and damp wood. At 9, sunlight burned the last of the storm from the patio stones. Naya was in the kitchen pouring black tea when Silas appeared at the doorway, no longer staring at the floor. "Mrs. Russell," he said. "Mr. Russell requests your presence in the study. He said it concerns your departure." Naya's hand stilled on the teapot. Departure. The word should have felt like relief. Instead, it opened a cold space under her ribs. She wiped her hands on a towel and went. The mahogany doors were open. Dante sat behind the desk, dressed composed and visibly exhausted. A thick manila folder waited before him. "A way out," Dante said. His voice was flat but not cold, more like he had removed every weapon from it. "Annulment papers. They say the marriage was never consummated. The church will accept it with enough of a donation." He pushed the folder forward. "A townhouse in Back Bay is already in your name. There is a trust, 50,000 a month for life. Your father's debt is cleared. The port access stays mine, but I will not touch him." Naya stared at the folder. "You are paying me out." Dante's jaw tightened. "No. I am giving you the choice I should have given you before I signed your name into my life." The words unsettled her more than the money. This was what she had wanted in the beginning. A clean door. No blood, no begging. No more waking up in a house where love and strategy wore the same suit. She could take the folder, pack her clothes, and disappear into a quiet life with clean sheets and no gunpowder in the laundry. Dante watched her, braced for the answer he thought he deserved. "If you leave," he said, "no one follows. No one reports to me. No one uses your father against you again." Naya looked at him sharply. He held her gaze. "I already told Silas. In writing." There it was. Not a promise spoken in panic. A decision made before she entered the room. Naya reached for the folder. Dante did not move. For a second, she imagined opening it. Signing, leaving. Becoming the woman everyone pitied at dinner parties. Poor Naya. Traded by her father. Paid off by her husband. Rescued at last by papers written by men. She looked at the polished floor, where Dante had gasped for air the night before. She looked toward the hall, where his men had stood, and heard him give her authority. Then she understood something with a strange, steady calm. Leaving would be freedom. Staying could be freedom too. If she stayed on terms she chose herself. Her hand closed around the folder. Dante's face tightened, but he said nothing. Naya placed the folder over the heavy glass ashtray and tore it in half. Dante shot to his feet. Naya, she tore the papers again. Then again. The annulment. The trust. The elegant exit. All ripped into strips and dropped into the ashtray. What are you doing? His voice shook. You should take it. Take the money and go. Naya leaned over the desk. You do not get to decide what my freedom looks like. Dante froze. She pointed to the ruined papers. You bought me once. You do not get to buy my departure too. If I leave one day, it will be because I choose to walk out. Not because you arranged the cleanest version of your guilt. Dante slowly sat back down, as if the words had taken the strength out of him. Then what do you want? He asked this time. The question had no bargain tucked inside it. Naya stood straight. The truth. Every time. About the business when it touches this house. About my father. About the commission. About men like Thomas before they reach my gates. Dante nodded once. Yes, I run this estate. She continued. Not because you allow it as a favor, but because I live here and bleed here and clean up the damage when your world comes through the door. His eyes lowered. Yes, and no man speaks about my body, my future, or my place at your side as if I am furniture. Dante looked up. I was wrong, he said. The words were simple, and that made them harder to dismiss. I was cruel because cruelty made me feel safe. I called it protection, because cowardice sounds better when you dress it in strategy. His voice roughened. You loved me, and I treated your love like a weakness someone could exploit. Then Thomas exploited the damage I made. Naya did not soften all at once. She could not. But she listened. I am not asking you to forgive me today, Dante said. I am asking what I have to do tomorrow. Naya let the silence stretch between them. Tomorrow you start by telling every man in this house that my place beside you is not temporary. Done, Dante said. And when Thomas calls again, you will be in the room, he answered. No hesitation. Naya studied him. If you have another panic attack, I will sit with you, she said. But if you turn me into a transaction again, I will not beg you to see me. I will make sure this house remembers exactly what you threw away. Dante absorbed that quietly. No defense. No command. I understand. For the first time, Naya believed he was not just afraid of losing her. He was afraid of becoming the man who deserved to. It was not forgiveness, but it was the beginning. And beginnings did not have to be soft to be real. Dante placed his hand on the desk, palm up, not reaching. Offering, Naya looked at it for a long moment. Then she set her hand over his. His skin was warm against her knuckles. It did not feel like a happy ending. It felt like signing a new contract in blood. Ash and dirt, with both of them finally reading the terms. No more lies, she said, no more lies. Dante repeated. His thumb moved once, barely brushing her hand. She allowed it for one breath. Then she pulled away. Not because she hated him, but because he still had to earn the right to hold anything longer. Dante accepted that. He let his hand fall back to the desk. Naya turned toward the door. I am going back to the garden, she said. Do not bother me until dinner. Dante stayed silent. For once, he did not try to stop her. She walked out with dirt still under her nails and the torn papers behind her. Outside, the storm had passed. The garden was still empty. Still wounded. Still waiting. But the soil was turned now. And this time, whatever grew there would be hers.